Live.
Okay, so I'd just like to quickly introduce the Santan Valley Advisory Council people. Our chair is, well, there he is, Steve Calandris. Our vice chair, Mark Linder. Oh, sorry. Well, okay, so I was trying to hide my accent. Our secretary, Andy Haas, and one of our directors, Angie Huckabee in the back. And so just a couple of administrative things. There are 4 fire exits, 2 there, 1 there, and 1 there. And the restrooms, if you go out these glass doors, just walk down around this hall, this window set, and they're right behind us. And that's pretty much it. So with that, I'll introduce our 2 presenters tonight from EPCOR. And first of all, thank them for coming. Let's see how much we'll applaud at the end. Okay, our Director of Public Affairs is Rebecca Stenholm. And Director of Customer Care, Sarah Skaggs. And with that, I'll stop talking.
Oh, stop. Thank you very much. I apologize for my voice. I'm on the tail end of the world getting the flu, and I'm still, someone told me this will last 5 weeks, so let's hope it doesn't. I'm perfectly healthy. There's no contagion up here, but I apologize. If you have to ask me to speak up, please do. So my name is Rebecca Stenholm, and I'm with EPCOR. I've come out to see all of you before, many times actually over the years since we stepped in 2018. And on the way here, I was actually kind of thinking to myself, okay, last time I was out here in the fall, we were talking about how what you're going to see in this presentation are really the culmination of 5 years of work. Because when you file a rate case, it's really up to a certain point in time. So as I was driving here very safely, I used my voice to ask AI to tell me how long ago was August 2018. We are, I think, a couple days shy of 6 years and 6 months. It's actually 6 years, 5 months, and 29 days or something like that. So everything that you see tonight and everything that is happening out there that you're not seeing, and we also have our Director of Operations here, has really been a fast track on the kinds of things that typically a utility would take a longer period of time to do. A utility that's well maintained wouldn't have to come in and do all of this work that we'll talk about. So I just want to introduce a couple of people that we also have here with us. We have John Boisel, who's back in the back. He's with our regulatory team. We have Victoria Ocula, who's with our government relations team. That smiling face right there is Amy Matthews. If you've ever called or emailed, she and her team are the ones behind it. So I don't ever see Amy without a smile. So just know that when you hear it on the phone, it's real. And then we have Tom Harrell with our conservation team there. Tom has lots of goodies that you might want to look at. It's information on how to reduce your water use. There's retrofit kits. We have some nice brochures. We're coming up to spring planting soon if it ever warms up. So he's got some information on that too. So with that, I'll get started. So if you were here before, you saw this presentation, and I'm just going to kind of walk you through this. Happy to answer any questions at the end if you can kind of hold them until the end, and then we'll go from there. So a little bit about this presentation. We'll just talk a little bit about the actual rate case process. It's a very different process than what a municipality goes through, a much more detailed process, a complex process, and that's a big part of how you need to understand these numbers because it can take years for a rate case to go through the process, whereas a municipal change might happen very quickly. We're going to go back to the starting point and remind you of what it was like in 6 years and almost 6 months ago. I actually came out here for the first time in July of 2018 to Section 11. Couldn't have been a worse time to visit Section 11. It was hot, it was very smelly, so we'll take you back to kind of that point. 2024 is when this application was filed. So we'll walk through what it looks like today and all the work that's been done. And then a little bit about where we are with the current rate review, a reminder on some customer assistance programs. So we do have programs that are available to our customers. And quite honestly, they're never full. So we'd like them to be full, and we always bring that up when we come out. So if you or someone you know can benefit from some of these, whether it's conservation kits or it's the deployed service member program, we'd love to hear from you. So a little bit about EPCOR, if you're not familiar already, we're largely in Arizona. It's actually 311,000 connections, and that's just organic growth over time. Obviously, Santan Valley is growing considerably. This is actually an area where we have probably the highest rate of new meters going into the ground. The West Valley is kind of right behind that. So a lot of our service areas are in the West and the East Valley. I'm just going to skim over this. You don't really need to know, we have 450 plus people. But what I do like to point out is this 300 at the bottom. I have absolutely nothing to do with that 300, but I love to talk about it. So we have been recognized by, our operations teams really, have been recognized by the Arizona Water Association more than 300 times for safety and operational excellence. Now, when we came here in 2018 and stepped in, I can assure you the system was not going to be awarded safety and operational excellence from the Arizona Water Association. Fast forward, and your system is now being recognized every year, both water and wastewater, for how far we've taken it. And that's really, it's the result of a lot of work by a lot of different people, and not just our team. It's a result of your community leaders bringing this to attention of the Corporation Commission. It's really looking at what needs to be done for growth. How do we manage growth? How do we get the infrastructure to a place where it can support it? And actually, in I think 2 weeks, February 16th, it'll be the 1-year anniversary of Copper Basin being turned on. So it's a good date. That's why I remember it. And I have a nice little plaque that reminds me. But that's something else we'll talk about here as well. So water reclamation, that's another thing that's really kind of grown for you here in the Santan Valley. So 5, 6 years ago, the water that was going into the wastewater facilities and being cleaned up really wasn't being put back to good use. It was just kind of being pushed out of the washes and sent off. Now, the wastewater coming from the Santan Valley system is all treated, purified, and it's put back into the cycle in some way. It could be used for irrigation effluent. It can be used for a recharge into the ground. Before that, all of your wastewater was really kind of not going anywhere, not going to good use. It was clean, but it was just being kind of shut out into the washes. So as a company, for about the past decade, we've collectively put 21.8 billion gallons of water back into that cycle. And that's, recharge, it's going to be reuse. We even use a little bit of the water in the plant itself to run it. So our goal is always to make sure that we don't waste any drop of water. As a company, not just here in Santan, but Santan plays a big role in that. 95.5% of the wastewater we collect is clean and put to good use. So you're participating in that, and now you're able to help the state with that effort where we're trying to keep those aquifers recharged. A little bit about your service area. So you probably know more than outsiders do, but your service area covers 160 square miles. That's a lot of territory. And so the team that Jacob oversees down here could be stretching all up into portions of Queen Creek, down into portions of Florence. But you can see most of it is here in the Santan Valley. And when we first stepped in, the system was originally not set up for growth. You all know that. You felt the pain. So a lot of the work that we've also done over the last 6.5 years is getting the system also strategically planned for the future. So how do we look at that? For example, when we came in, your system had 31 lift stations. The city of Phoenix had less lift stations than your system did. It wasn't well planned. So a lot of this work is not just getting into the ground and replacing things, it's setting your system up so it's going to be safe and reliable ongoing. A little bit about rates, and I can tell you I'm not on the regulatory team, but I am a customer in one of our other districts. And so I like to know, what does that mean? And it's, like I said, it's very complex. There are a lot of very qualified people who put together mountains of data. This is the case for any regulated utility. This is how rates are reviewed. This is how they're adjusted. Nothing is done quickly, and nothing is done without careful review, and not just by us. So our team, we're our finance team, our engineering team, our operations team, regulatory, all work to bring all of that data together. What was the cost to run your service during that period in time? And what needed to be spent to either repair or replace the infrastructure to keep it going safely and reliably. Santan's a little bit of a different story. You all know that. When we were brought in, there was sewer outflows in the street. I can tell you that every Friday for the first 6 months, I got a call from our water quality manager to tell me that there was either a sewer overflow or we had a different issue. So we know how much you put up with. So all of that data is put together, and the actual rate process is about 24 to 30 months. So once you put the data together based on a test year, which is usually a calendar year, then it gets submitted to the Arizona Corporation Commission, and from that point on, it takes another roughly 12 months. We've seen it take longer. I don't think I've ever seen it go shorter, but that process is meant to be the process where everything is carefully reviewed and looked at for your benefit. The Residential Utility Customers Office is your advocate. They participate in the process. You can absolutely get all of this information online. I don't recommend you print it because if we're going to be sustainable, that might mean some things about trees. But all of this information is available to you. You can get to it through our website, but it's also on the Arizona Corporation Commission website. Everything that we do, every penny that is spent for your service is carefully reviewed. If Jacob needs to buy a new meter, that new meter is in that data. And we have to rationalize why we needed that new meter. So as you look at your systems that are in the ground, we don't just go in and arbitrarily replace meters or change out pipes. There is a plan behind it, a capital investment plan, to make sure that as that work is happening, it's not just balancing the health of the system itself, it's also taking a careful look at what does it mean for you, the customer. Because ultimately, with all regulated utilities, with all utilities really, municipal as well, all of the costs for our utility systems come back to us as the customer. The more people you have in a district, the lower those impacts are to you, so you're a rather healthy district. One of our districts in southern Arizona has 600 people in it. So about a decade ago, we had to put $1 million in work into their system because the government changed a certain regulatory requirement. That $1 million had to be spread across just those customers. So one of the benefits you have is you're one of our bigger districts. You have a larger group to spread that across. All of those expenses are reviewed and approved, and not just on paper. The commission actually comes out to our facilities. They want to see that it's in the ground and it's actually working for you. It's benefiting you. So really the metric that needs to be met is that it's used and useful. So it's not just that we bought the meter is in the ground and the meter is working for you. There's only one point in this whole process, well there's two really, but one, where we are required to provide you with information. And that is when the application is filed. So when we file the application, and this is the case for every utility, They will look at it and go, okay, is everything in this application that we need in order to move it to the next step in the process? Once they agree that it is, they issue what's called a procedural order. We have some copies at the back, if you'd like, of this original procedural order. And we're required to send it to you, the customer, in whatever format you prefer to receive your bills. So if you are receiving a paper bill, you get it in the mail. If you have opted for paperless billing, you would get it by email. But either way, that notice is our way of telling you this application is in the process, but it's very early in the process. The document you receive outlines key dates. When is the deadline for me to intervene if I want to intervene? When is a public comment session set? When does the hearing start? And that is the only time we're required to notice you and let you know that something is happening. It's not just us. We don't think that's enough, so we held community meetings last fall. We were very excited to be invited out here tonight to talk to you again. The numbers that have been submitted have not changed from the original application because we haven't quite reached those milestones in the process. But we just don't think that procedural order is enough. So that's why you have a dedicated website section that you can go to. It's why we make sure that we come out and we have these meetings. In addition, tonight, where it's being recorded, we actually have a recording of this presentation from last fall online, so that if you couldn't make the meeting or you wanted to go back and hear my voice again, just because we were, having so much fun, it's available to you. So, and we answer questions all the time. We have a dedicated inbox, rate case questions at epcor.com. And like I said, Amy's team always has a smile on their face, even when you're asking them the hard questions. I just ask that you be nice when you ask them. So when you boil it all down, all of this data and all of these numbers over the course of a year, it's really 3 buckets. And I'm not doing justice to the math, but if you simplify it, just so it's for me, a non-rates person, what's really in my rates? It comes down to capital investment. That's fixing the system, rehabbing the system, growing the system if we need to. Times a return on investment. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And then it's plus operating costs. Operating costs are paying the field service technician who's going out and checking your meter. It's the chemicals that are needed to make sure that we are treating the water to the standards that it needs to be treated. It's power for running the facilities. All of those costs come through to you dollar for dollar or penny for penny, however you want to look at it. There's no, APS raised their bill by 30%, so we're going to add another 10% on. It doesn't work that way. It's straight through. And the next thing I'm going to show you is it's a graphic we use to kind of boil this down to, if we took $1 of water, what does that look like? So there's our dollar. If you print it, it's not going to get you anything, but it's a really great way of explaining how everything breaks out. The first third of the dollar, and this is an average across EPCOR systems, but it's a good illustration. The first third of that dollar, so 32 cents roughly, goes straight back into the system. That's buying the meters, that's replacing the pipes, it's building copper basin. It's all of those physical components that are needed. And think of it a little bit like, you want to reserve something and you need to put a down payment on it. We have to upfront the money for this. You actually don't see these costs until much later. So the bills that you're paying today are based on costs that happened before the last time your rates were set. So all of the information you see here is going to be what's been done since that point. So when you look at the time frame for a rate case, 24 to 30 months, if you really think about it, the rates that we all pay for our service, mine included, are always lagging historically because they're based on a historical point in time. The remaining 2/3 of that dollar is the penny for penny pass-through. This is your operating costs, taxes, insurance, property tax, servicing the debt. It's the things we need to do administratively to run the system, that's really the rest of the dollar. And again, there's no markup on that. It simply comes through as it came to us. And I just want to stress that this is an illustration because some people in the past have immediately kind of done some math with that. Well, okay, that's a big number. It's really just illustrative. But the point I want to show to you is the return on investment that we're allowed to earn. And we're allowed to earn it, and that's an important part of realizing that. It's not guaranteed. So if for some reason we're not responsible and are prudent with our operating costs and find ways to be as efficient as possible, that's going to eat into the 3 cents. So we are always very careful about those expenses. We're very cost effective. We're always looking for the best price, the best quality for you. But this is not a guarantee for the company. It's simply something we are permitted to do by the commission, and they have a cap on it. They call that, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't hear you.
Rate of return.
Rate of return. Sorry, my ears are still a little plugged too, so I apologize. But the rate of return is never a guarantee for us. This is something that we can earn up to. If we start to earn over it, we have to come in and do a rate case. If we are not earning it, it means we're not earning the amount of money that needs to come back into the system. That could trigger a rate case, but it is not a large amount. And this is the only place where you can earn it, is on that first third. There's your dollar. So I'm going to take you back to 2018. These are actually your comments. I went back and read and watched all of the hearings pre-EPCOR, the ones where you really brought it to the Corporation Commission's attention and said, we have a problem out here. So I kind of pulled a sampling of them. I mean, thematically, there were a lot of things that were just consistent, but you know, we really literally had one of the community members down here tell the commission, quote for quote, I can't flush my stool after midnight. Was it?
Yeah, it was.
I loved it. No, I'm sorry, I didn't recognize it. But we really, really wanted to, when we saw this, and obviously we weren't running the system, but we always want to be helpful where we can. But it wasn't our system. So we're watching this. We know that it's not running the way it needs to be. We know it's not master planned. It's really a credit to all of you that your system is now where it is today. Yes, we can come in and we can fix things and we can build things and we can run the system, but none of that would have happened if it wasn't for your voice collectively. So I just want to acknowledge that we understand the past and the history that you had to deal with. And we are just, I'm not to sugarcoat it, but our team is actually really proud that we got to play a part in helping get your system up and running. So 2018, you had more than 530 recorded complaints to the ACC about Johnson Utilities. They ranged, you saw some of them on the previous slide. There were 78 sewer overflows in the year before we were appointed interim director to step in. Now, to put that in context, I don't think Sarah and I ever have to do any communications on sewer overflows. So like I said, I got a call almost every single Friday. I don't know why it would happen on a Friday, but it was always a Friday. And so when we first stepped in, one of the very first things we had to do was get an ongoing sewer overflow that, you know, arguably had been going on for about 4 weeks at that point under control. 3.65 billion gallons of water lost. We live in Arizona. We don't want to lose water if we can avoid it. That's from leaks, it's from other things, but Jacob and his team found a pipe that wasn't even on the blueprints in the ground that had probably been leaking for a decade, 1 million gallons a day. I mean, that's a lot of water in Arizona just going to waste. The water loss for the Santan district, the state standard is really 10%. This district, this service area was at 24%. So significantly higher than what the state wants us to be at. We had pipes bypassing systems to toss things into manholes. It was It was a challenge, but it was one that every single person on our team had no issues stepping in to do. And in fact, I think it's probably one of the projects that I've seen the most excitement from people, because they had a problem to solve. They had people to help. So, so in that regard, I can thank you for the visit to Section 11 in July. Here's where we started. We did an engineering review right away, and the critical and immediate improvements, these are the things that had to be done. 22 water projects, 48 wastewater projects. The wastewater system could not sustain the current population, let alone growth. And it was everything from drilling new wells, replacing lines, the booster stations to lift the water along, broken valves when you're trying to turn them, lift stations for the wastewater weren't operating properly. We had the sewer overflows, and the facilities themselves were not equipped to handle what was coming in. So the very first thing we did was expand EPCOR and Anthem. Was a project as well, but the big project was really Copper Basin Water Reclamation Facility, which is actually just a couple miles that way. It's across the road. It's been, like I said, it's been up and running for just under a year, and we'll be marking that in a few weeks. I like to show some of the pictures because this is what the operations team has to deal with. This is what they always told me was a hairball. It's not something I'd want to get involved with, but this is what we found. These are the kinds of things that the team could have manually go in and clean these out. So I've always said that I think our wastewater operators should be the highest paid people in the world, because I would never want to do that job. But this is the kind of stuff they were dealing with. This picture here is actually one I took that July at Section 11. That crane is removing sludge from the basins. Now it's always good to have a healthy amount of sludge. I think, Jacob, you told me at one point it was like 6 to 7 feet of sludge. So we had cranes in there pulling that out. You've got a pump there. This is a sewer overflow shortly after we took over. This is what the pipes look like. You can see here, this is not a very safe situation, not just from a system, but from a people standpoint. And this is Section 11. This is what it looked like. Section 11, the whole intent is that we're cleaning the wastewater. That's not clean. So this was one of Jacob's immediate priorities, was getting in and getting Section 11 to the point where it could at least run properly to the best of its ability. Water, we have new wells, we replaced and repaired pipelines, valves, booster stations, a lot of electrical work too. We don't really think of that when we think about our utilities. I certainly don't. But the electrical systems to run all of these, we had to do a lot of work there as well. Again, we removed the sludge, we did all of those. There were lift stations that had no alarms on them. So if the lift station overflowed, we didn't know until we got a call. So we had to get all of those sorts of things implemented. So last year, it was 5 years later, and this is what you see largely in the application. You've received $259 million in system improvements. That's how much work had to be done. And I was saying earlier in the presentation that typically that amount of work would be stretched over a much longer time frame. Your system simply couldn't wait. In order to just have it running reliably and safely for you, this is the work that had to be done. 80 million of that is the new Copper Basin Water Reclamation Facility. Now that that facility is online and operational, we are able to decommission Section 11. So it needs to be turned off by the end of this year, so flows are being diverted, and then we'll remediate the land and it will be all cleaned up. Copper Basin is the reason that we needed, Copper Basin was in order to shut Section 11 down. One of the agreements we made when we acquired the system was we committed to having it shut down by the end of this year. And Jacob's team is already working on it. The other thing is with Copper Basin, that water that used to just be treated and put in a wash is now being used. It's either being recharged, it's being sold for irrigation, and it's also designed so that as Santan Valley expands, that facility can expand with what you need. Again, the existing facilities, again, we added capacity to Pecan and Anthem. Some of your comments, if you look back, where you couldn't take a shower, you didn't have enough water pressure. So things like that, where it was operational efficiencies too. It wasn't just about replacing things or fixing things. There were solutions that Jacob and the team came up with that were really cost effective for you, but addressed some of these things. The customer satisfaction, rightfully so, was very low when we came in. This 96%, when I came here in October, it was 95. Well, we just got our new number. We're at 96%. And that's, it's a combination of things. And we don't just send out a survey. We actually ask people who have interacted with us in some way. So I don't ever call our call center because I know where they work. I probably just walked down the hall. But if you call the call center, if someone comes to your home for an issue, whatever contact you've had, those are the individuals determining the customer satisfaction. It's not simply someone who gets a bill. We really want to talk to the people who've had an experience one-on-one with us and understand, did we do it well? Did we do it right? Did we solve the problem? Did we do it efficiently and quickly for you? And then the other big thing was, when we stepped in, there had to be a moratorium on new meters going into the ground, which obviously Santan is growing at an incredible pace. And so that was a big issue for developers, it was a big issue for growth projections, but we had to do the right thing so that we could fix the problems before it grew out of hand even more. And really, our first responsibility is to the customers who are already in their homes. So once a copper basin was up and running, we were able to lift that meter moratorium. Here are some other things that you may not necessarily see outright, but these are some other things that came to you through those 5 years. We actually deleted $31.3 million in your costs when we acquired the system. We wrote off money, we contributed money for Copper Basin. So again, keep in mind that typically a utility, whether it's a regulated utility or municipal utility, the costs are all calculated into our rates. We took a big chunk of those out. The class action settlement, we weren't actually a party to the settlement, but we've been told by the legal counsel, if we had not helped to facilitate getting that money back to people, you would actually have received less from the settlement. Tax refunds, we have a great tax guy. I swear every meeting I'm in, he's found something else that can come back. He found this for you. So we've gotten these in tax refunds. And water resources. So here in the Santan Valley, you are dependent on groundwater. We are able to put 13,500 acre-feet of water back into the ground now that all this work has been completed. So you are recharging that. And over time, that's going to help you from a rate perspective, but from a sustainability perspective too. You will have those credits. You will have that where you need them in the future. I was mentioning Jacob and the team and their operational efficiencies, so significant cost savings. So for example, they were able to remove $15 million in infrastructure projects that we thought we needed to do by simply improving the operations of the system. Getting in there and looking at how we can fine-tune things, problem solving, and that takes money out of what you would end up seeing in your rates. We found energy cost savings, your water loss. I told you before it was 24%. We got it below 10. And that's all based on all of these different things. The nitrate levels, that was a concern when we first stepped in. That was one of the first projects we had. Reduced those, and we stabilized the water pressure and supply. So when you look at the infrastructure, I would really encourage you to think of it in those terms, because it's really ultimately the service that you're getting on the back end. Just a couple pictures of some things that we did pretty quickly. So this is at the main facility. This is a treatment process that was put in pretty quickly. Actually, it's one of the first projects. This is what a pipe should look like. I showed you earlier pictures of pipes the way we found them. This is a clean pipe. This is sectional and then after. we got it to the best of its ability. So you don't see all of the growth and everything everywhere. This is what it should be looking like. And this is Copper Basin. This is what we completed just a year ago. Like I said, it's just across the road, up a couple miles. It's a large facility. It is fully enclosed, so the entire wastewater treatment process happens within walls. We have odor scrubbing technology, and then all of that water is reused and put to good use. And then we can expand that as we need. And that's just another picture of it. So in terms of this application, so the rates that you're paying today are based on what it costs to provide your service in 2019. So your rates are pretty outdated at this point. That's not abnormal for a regulated utility. We work on a historical test year. This is pretty common that your rates are going to be lagging. We filed a rate case on those 2019 costs, but they actually didn't go into effect until 2022, and that's that 24 to 30 months time frame. The test year was 2019, but you didn't see those changes until 2022. All the work we just went through, the test year for this application is 2023. So we're in 2025, and we're already 2 years beyond that. The application was filed in 24 in June. Like I said, it's a pretty lengthy process. And we're just coming up to the parts of the process where they do the hearing, and there's the public comment session, and I'll show you that on the next page. So in the numbers you see in this, essentially that 259 million that I mentioned earlier is actually the totality of what was spent since August 2018. So anything that was in those 2019 numbers is not included, but this is the amount of improvement that your system needed. And that's the split between the two. So when we get questions on, well, why is the request for water so different than wastewater? And that's because the need was so different on both sides. We had to put 51 million in the ground for water, but wastewater is more than a $200 million price tag to get that system to where it is today. So we always try to give you an example, and keep in mind your bills are always going to be based on you individually. My bill is pretty good when my kids are not home. When they're home, it doubles. It just, happens. So the state average for water usage, if you look at the ADWR website, is 7,000 gallons a month. So you're actually using a little bit lower than the state average, which is good. Wastewater is always a flat charge. We don't base it on the amount of water that is used because really a lot of that water is going to be used in other ways. So if we look at your current bill and where it sits today, and again, this is an average bill for the average customer on a 3/4 inch meter. If you have a bigger meter, you have a bigger home, you have more plumbing fixtures, the numbers would be different. But this is, the average customer for this area. Those are what the numbers look like. The proposed bill, and proposed is the important word here, nothing is final in that application that went in. Those numbers are proposed. Until the Corporation Commission makes a decision, these are just showing you what it could look like. The change, you can see again, the wastewater is the driver here. It's not the water side. Yes, the water side needed work, but again, going back to the comments that you saw on the screen, it was the wastewater system that needed the most care. And then we have a deferred debit charge that's there as well. Now these numbers, like I said, they're not final. I've never seen them go up. They always go in favor of the customer. And they will change. We've never seen them stay with what was submitted. So what will happen next in the process is you'll hear from ACC staff because they've been evaluating all of this and what they think the numbers should be. RUCO will also be doing the same thing. Then there'll be a hearing. We will go through that process. It's in front of an administrative law judge, and it's public. You can watch it online if you want to sit through 2 weeks of hearings. And there is a public comment session on the front end. Now, you can put a comment in any time. You can send it in by email, you can send it in by mail, you can even call if you want to the commission. But there is also a public comment session that you can attend if you wish. I'll show you the dates in a minute, but we really like to point out some of the benefits that come to you. And again, I have nothing to do with any of these. I mean, they look great, but to be honest, I can't take any credit. This is really the team delivering your service. So your system, like I was saying earlier, you're being recognized for safety, operational excellence. We work on this program with the Arizona Departments of Occupational Safety and Health Administration. They have what's called a voluntary protection program. And what that means is that you kind of put your hand up and say, we want to be evaluated in terms of workplace safety and what level are we at. Star level is the highest level that we can get to. There are roughly 70 work sites in the entire state of Arizona that have achieved this. 3 of them are EPCORs, and we're hoping to have one soon for Copper Basin. Copper Basin is brand new, obviously, but these are things that really speak to the operation of your system, the safety of your water. This last one is due to sustainability. It's really all about that recharge and that reuse, those numbers I've shown you there. And one that's not on here is that earlier this month, the General Contracting Association for Arizona actually awarded Best Project to Copper Basin. So that's new. I'm sure we'll see more recognition for the facility, but it just didn't make it on here. Before I get to those dates, customer assistance programs, we have to ask for these to be renewed in every rate case, and obviously we want them renewed. The first one we have is a low-income assistance program. The threshold's pretty simple. It's 200% of the poverty guideline, the federal poverty guideline. And if you qualify under that, it's a $10 credit on your bill. And not just if you're a water and a wastewater customer, it's actually a credit on both. So you'd get 20. So if you know someone who could benefit from this, who's a customer, we really, really would like you to pass that word along. Deployed service member credit, this is actually Sarah's doing. So if you are an active member of the service, doesn't matter which arm, and you are going to be sent on deployment away from your home, we will waive your bill until you come back. When you come back, you don't owe in arrears. You just go forward from there. We figure the least we can do, given that you're off serving your country. We also have a disabled veterans assistance program, also Sarah's suggestion. So if you've been disabled as part of your service, again, whatever arm, and this could be, you're receiving care from the VA or things like that, you can get a $10 credit on your bill. And you can actually get the disabled and the low income together. So if you qualified for low income and you were both a water and a wastewater customer, there's $20, and if you were disabled veterans, you add another 10, and that would be $30 off your monthly bill. So what's next? So we did sessions in the fall. We're back out here tonight at your invitation, and thank you very much. Our website is maintained. We really haven't had to change it because nothing has changed in those numbers yet. But the public comment session, and again, the procedural order is in the back there, is scheduled for February 13th. There are 2 sessions. You can call in, you can go in person. There's one in the morning and there's one at night. So if you work during the day and you want to do it at night, if you don't work during the day, you have your options. The public hearing, and that's the hearing in front of the administrative law judge, that starts on March 31st. It's actually it runs for 2 weeks, pretty much all day. You can watch it online. You can go down there if you really don't have anything else to do. But they are long days, but it is an opportunity to hear all of the dialogue about what's in the application and the rationale behind it. So that public hearing starts on the 31st. After that hearing is over, what happens next is the administrative law judge takes everything that they've heard, all of the testimony, all of the data, takes it away and comes back with what they call a recommended order and opinion. So much like any legal case, it's what they're recommending that decision be. And when that comes back, that's the point at which this actually gets scheduled to be on an open meeting for the Arizona Corporation Commission. And at that open meeting, commissioners will review the order that's been recommended, and they will make a decision. They could vote to keep the order exactly the way the judge wrote it. They could choose to change things. Like I said earlier, I've never seen them go in the utilities' favor. They've always gone in the customer's favor. And so that's why I encourage you, when you look at these numbers, just to remember that they're not the final numbers, but they give you an idea. So given the timeline where we're at, we think we could get a decision around the 1st of September, but we've also seen things happen longer. It's really, at that point, it's really up to the commission on the timeline. With that, we have our customer care number and Amy's wonderful team. Rate case questions at EPCOR.com. We also have My Water at EPCOR.com, which is really the one you use the most. So you feel free to send questions there. We have information on our website. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions. And if I can't answer, I have people who can. Yes. And I'll repeat the questions.
The last one of these that you did here, one of the last.
Yep.
I asked a question about the smell at Pecan Creek.
Yes.
And a gentleman, I believe one of the engineers, came up and answered and said that it had to be completed by December 15th.
So that was Jed. Jed was one of the two.
Yeah, I don't think I was here for that. Yeah.
Anyway, and I drove by there yesterday at 1:20 p.m. and I could smell it.
Yeah, and there's absolutely still.
Why don't you get up and use
no.
the microphone and get in front of the camera? There you go.
Yeah, hi, my name's Jacob Rogers. I'm the operation director for Santan District, and what you're speaking about is the Pecan wastewater treatment plant and an H2S problem there that we've discovered over the last couple of years. Really the result of poor construction. So Rebecca mentioned earlier that we have, actually we're up to 34 lift stations. And the ones that were built by Johnson Utilities are horizontal. And in this industry, typically a lift station is designed to change the hydraulic elevation of the flow and get it to a gravity sewer or a wastewater plant or something like that. These particular force mains are horizontal. They've got these dip sections. They weren't properly designed, and they create a lot of odors from sloshing. I mean, there's a lot of different issues with these horizontal lift stations. We've addressed the issue. There's an additional carbon scrubber going in the Pecan facility. Jed was supposed to have that project completed by the 15th. There were some issues, supply chain issues, and that should be done within the next couple of weeks. It's not going to be much longer. I know that the carbon scrubber is in place. They've got the carbon on standby. There was an electrical conduit run that needed to be completed, and then that project will be done. But I assure you that it won't be any longer than 2 more weeks.
It's going to hold you to it.
Yeah, I know. That's a piece of cake.
If nothing else, we'll have you back so I can yell
For sure.
at one of you.
I don't remember when the next update is, but absolutely be done by then.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I do appreciate all that EPCOR has been doing for us, but so I live in a Cambria, and I pay County Creek for my water.
Yep.
And then I said, so I called County Creek, why can't I use them for my sewage?
Yeah.
And they said that they cannot, that they, because of your contract or whatever. But so why is that? I mean,
No, it's a great question, and that's really.
I use them for water, why can't I use them?
It's a great question. Actually, my bill is very similar. So I'm in the city of Peoria, on the dark side of the moon from here, and they are my wastewater provider, but EPCOR is my water provider. And so what happens, and this happens a lot with growth too, a regulated utility can operate and is authorized and responsible for a certain area. We can't operate outside of those boundaries. If a developer were to come to us and say, we're building this new community and the town doesn't have the capacity to do it, can you come in and serve it? We would have to ask permission from the Corporation Commission to extend that service area. So what's probably happened, I can't speak to the exacts of it, but our service area for wastewater includes your area, but the town of Queen Creek is responsible for your water. So it really comes down to a number of different things. It could be when your development was being built, did the town have the ability to actually take it on at that point for wastewater? Did they have the infrastructure on the ground? So that's typically what can happen, but it's not uncommon. Yes, ma'am.
I can clarify that. A different water company used to provide the water service, and they sold to Queen Creek. That's why you get water from town.
Yeah, I believe it was diversified water at
It
the
was,
time.
yeah, it was Jerry Schnapp's.
I learned something new from my favorite quote.
You have a couple questions.
You're famous. Yes, ma'am.
Just for clarification, I had knee surgery that year, and I have a 2-story house. And I couldn't go up and down the stairs to go to the restroom, so I was only using one restroom. And I would flush it, and it wouldn't go up until 6 o'clock in the morning. So that's where all that comment came from. If I could have gone up and down the steps, I had 2 more toilets I could have used.
But still, it should have worked no matter which toilet.
Right, we're not a third world country, right?
No, we're not. We're not.
That was one of my favorite comments. So I have questions. If rate cases are so important, and I have a little bit of utility experience. If rate cases are so important, why didn't you press for a rate case before you purchased Johnson Utilities? And are we picking up the tab for some of that lack of doing due diligence back when you purchased it? Because you would have seen all these inadequacies and you would have known how much money would have had to been pumped back into the infrastructure.
No, it's a really good question. So there was actually a rate case in process when we were appointed to be interim manager. So there was already one underway. That ended up becoming the case that was finalized in 2019. And then from there, all that work had to be done. Now, I can honestly say it's not our favorite thing to file a rate case. You don't like it, we don't like it. There's a lot of work that goes involved. We never want to tell anyone that, unfortunately, we're going to need to change the rates. It's just, we would rather not be here asking you these things or telling you these things. But the time to develop a rate case and the amount of money that had to go into the system, we just had to move on those items. And the rate cases started working on it once they got through the one that was approved in 2022. This test year is 2023, so literally the next year. In terms of the looking at the system, so we can't, as a regulated utility, we cannot ask for money upfront. We have to spend it and ask for recovery of it, and we get whatever is approved. It's not a guarantee. But in looking at the system, I mean, we used every penny that we could of George Johnson's money to get into the system. We used every single penny of it. Everything we had access to went right back into your system. Obviously, it wasn't enough because you're talking about decades of mismanagement, poor planning. So on a go-forward basis, the engineering report showed us what had to be done. Now, could we have walked away and said, we don't want any part of this because it's going to be expensive? Sure, but it's not the right thing to do. It's not what we wanted to do. So we know it's hard to come out and say, we had to spend this money and it's, we now have to come to you. But it's not a process where we can go in advance and say, we want this before we're going to get it. And a regulated utility just has to spend the money and then ask for it back.
So to kind of segue on what she stated, I know at one time we were providing, or Johnson Utility was providing affluent water to Incanterra for the golf course. Are you still providing affluent water? And
Yes.
if you are, how is that affecting the groundwater going back in to offset our CGRD fees?
So we are still providing, the question was, are we still providing that effluent to Cantera? And the answer is yes. And the second part of that question was, how is that offsetting the CAGRD fees, which have been a source of confusion to a lot of people. First of all, there's two active management areas in the Santan district. There's Phoenix and there's Pinal, and they're not necessarily based on the counties or those lines. It's just the way they're set up with ADWR. And if you're in one, you're going to pay a certain fee. If you're in the other, you're going to pay a different fee, and the fees are different. We've been working, so as we increase the ability to get your water resources to a point where we have more and the charges are there, they're going to benefit you, but it's not something that happens overnight. It helps to bring down those costs. So just recently we were able to decrease the CAGRD fee again. And that's really what we want to do, is we want to keep reducing that by being more responsible with the water that previously wasn't used.
Yeah, I just want to say that the Encantera agreement was in place with Johnson Utilities, and we had to honor that when we came in. But it does help the bottom line too. It's the cost of effluent is pretty expensive, so it does help the utility and help the customer.
Okay, so then, what about the assured water for all these apartment complexes that are going in? I know the state says if it's one landowner, they don't have to go through all the rigmarole that you do for just an individual builder, but how about the assured water for all of these residents that are being multi-residentials instead of single family?
That's really state law. That's not something we can control. So when a developer comes to us and says, we want you to be the water provider, they have to show us that they have 100 years of water. They have to bring it to
the state has to show you, or
the developer. The developer. They have to bring that assurance to us because we already have our water resources and they're already committed and we've got them planned out. But the state law has loopholes. There's no question. When it comes to a development, so I'm sure you've all heard about Rio Verde Foothills. I mean, it was international news, so made it sound like Arizona was shriveling up and wouldn't sustain life in the near future. That is an instance where you have property owners who split their lots into 5 or less. The state law says if you split it into 6 or more, you have to show that you have that assured water supply. But a small property owner who splits it into 5 or less does not. And that's really what you see happening up in Rio Verde Foothills, because they didn't have to show that assured water supply. But there are also different rules for commercial and multi-use. So residential is the one with the assured water supply. I don't know off the top of my head exactly what the rules are on, but Tom in the back would be able to walk you through those. And Tom's going to put his arm up right now, so you all know who Tom is.
With the automated processes that are in effect now, there's been a lot of them. Shouldn't operating costs be going down?
It's a great question, actually. I'm going to toss it over to Jacob. I can tell you that our operating costs we're very efficient as a utility, but I'll let Jacob speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so there's a couple automated processes. One of them we recently put in, so that's AMI, that's the automatic meter reading system. We don't have to deploy a truck, we don't have to deploy an operator. I think one other big automation, and actually I was joking with a coworker today on how the utility world's been using AI for probably 20 or 30 years. And this is something that Johnson Utilities didn't have. And we're still like building these AI systems that'll help us run our wastewater plants or water plants. And it's essentially a computer that monitors different parameters like elevations in a tank or pressures in a system and automatically makes adjustments so that we don't have to deploy an operator constantly. Those systems are still being built. We put in some pretty rudimentary systems to help us get by until we can fully build out those AI type systems.
So on the automated meter reading, if you still have old meters in place, that's not doing us any good, is it?
So they're actually the same meters in most cases with a radio transmitter instead of like a physical display.
So the meters that are reading your water and are saying you're using 25,000 gallons instead of 24871 gallons. Those ones that are rounding it up to a 000 balance, are those equipped properly to do the automated meter reading?
I can take that.
Yeah.
Let me take that.
Sarah would be better for this one.
Sorry.
Jacob and I literally spent all day today talking about this,
Yes.
so I'll be happy to talk about this. So I just want to clarify something you said about meters rounding. Meters do not round up. So think of the meter read like your car, the mileage on your car. We all have that 1/10, 2/10, right, 1/10 of a mile. But you don't actually record a mile until it's flipped to the 10th, right? And then it flips to 1 mile and then 2 miles. That's how your meter flips. But it flips instead of on the 1 or the 10 or the 100, it flips on the 1,000. So until you use 1,000 gallons, we don't actually bill you for it. So you could have used 999 gallons this month. You won't be billed until that flips that 1 more gallon in the next month. And if you think about it, our rates for the first tier are under $2. So really, you're just talking about a $2 difference from month to month pushing. So there is no rounding up. I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that. The other project that Jacob and I are working on, so his team is actually out in the field reprogramming all of those meters, installing those antennas. We have about 5,000 left to do. And then my team, will be prepared to actually digitize all of that, digest that data, and then actually present it to you, not only on your bill, so that we can just once a month get that read whenever we need it, but we can also present it in the customer portal to you in hourly increments. So you'll actually be able to go on your customer portal. We're going to do a soft launch just because we don't want 35,000 people going to the website and then calling us, wanting us to help them with their graphs. But as you log in, probably by this summer, you'll notice that your usage graph will all of a sudden have some nice little tools on it, and you can actually expand and contract it. And you can identify even the day that maybe your toilet started leaking. You can set alerts, and we have tons of information that will actually help you troubleshoot that leak. And then the nice thing is that instead of finding about a leak when you get your bill, you'll know about it the day of. So we'll be rolling that out probably in the next, I don't want to say the number of months because we've got 5,000 meters to go, but it will be this year, and hopefully by this summer the customers will see that. So huge self-service tool that we're really excited about.
So I did work for a gas company, and we used iTron meter reading devices and mammographs and all of that stuff. So I'm glad to hear that you guys are doing that. The one other thing, I really appreciate you fixing the water pressure, but I think the water pressure caused a problem with my house, my neighbor's house, and the house on the other side of it. It blew out my pipeline in 2020 to a toilet. Then it did the same thing to my neighbor's house, and just in 2021. And in 2024, it just did it to the neighbor on the other side. Are you regulating the water pressure, or what can we do to protect our homes?
I can answer this one, and then I will send it over to Jacob because he can talk about the pressures. But this happened to me as well, and I actually ended up my entire service line blew, and $3,500 later in a hotel stay over the weekend, I found out that I had no pressure reducing valve on my home, and that simple $75 part installed by a licensed plumber would have saved me thousands of dollars. So I absolutely recommend that anyone who's experiencing what they believe are high pressures, call us. We will actually go and check and make sure, and we can tell you what your pressure is. And then if it exceeds a certain amount, and we'll let Jacob talk about that, we would encourage you to get a pressure reducing valve.
I'm impressed. She knows the PRV, so.
Sir?
Yes, go ahead.
Water pressure in my house right now is 85 inside.
Yes, and there is no regulation on water pressure, and unfortunately, this is another example of poor construction or poor design, poor master planning.
It was 40 PSI when Johnson had.
Sure. And so we've got to generate enough pressure at the water plants to reach the furthest point in the system and provide that particular customer with around 55 to 60 PSI. And sometimes that means creating 100, 110 PSI near our water plants. And it's typical to have a PRV. And a lot of times when the developer comes in, they'll do pressure reads, they'll do pressure studies to understand what the pressure is. And then they'll design every individual home with the PRV device to regulate the pressure. And those PRVs are pretty neat because you can actually set them to whatever pressure you design.
Thank you for your time, I appreciate it.
Yes. You're welcome. Go ahead.
Hi, so I'm back to the sewage thing. That's all I pay for. I think $70 a month just for paying for that is a lot of money, especially for us that are on strict budgets. What about like getting the money more from like this giant LG plant that's getting built up, you know? I mean, what about like getting money from whoever owns the company, I apologize, but from companies instead of, you know, like I'm at work 5 days a week. I have 2 jobs. I'm never at home. I hardly use my toilet. So for me, it's very frustrating that you guys want to raise it to $24 when we are growing. I would think that if you spread it out to everybody, that price should be able to come down. I mean, from $24 a month.
We know the number is big, we know that. We don't like having to, we know the number is big, we don't like to have to come out and tell you these things. It's really a symptom of all of that infrastructure work that needed to be done. It is spread across all customers, and the commercial customers also pay, so it's not just residential. But this is where I'm getting a little bit out of the swim lane, because the rate structure is not as simple as saying this and this and this. There's a lot of math behind it. But the good news is Sarah doesn't just run a great customer care shop. She has an accounting background, and she used to be on our rates too.
So we prepare for every single rate case we're required to. It's called a cost of service study. And we take, and so we have those 3 circles that kind of show the very simplest format for how we calculate this. But in reality, every single cost is actually allocated to the user. So infrastructure that's only serving a large industrial, that infrastructure is in their cost of service. You are not paying for that. So when we say that it's spread around everyone, it's weighted, and industrial customers, commercial customers absolutely pay a much heavier weighted portion of the total cost that EPCOR needs to recover in order to be made whole, which doesn't make that $70 any easier to swallow, but I can assure you that we take into account very seriously who is causing the costs that are being recovered rates.
So, yeah, one of my questions is anyway, is EPCOR only in Arizona?
No, we're actually, we're a North American company, but I can tell you that we are headquartered in Phoenix. In the States, we're in Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. But most of our regulated customers are here in Arizona, the ones you saw on the map. In Texas, we run a small gas utility, and we run what we refer to as commercial wholesale water. So think of really, really big pipes taking the water from A to B. We provide 20% of the water to San Antonio. We provide to some small municipalities outside, but Arizona is really where our regulated customers are.
Yeah, I paid a bill once, I was like, EPCOR. I was trying to talk to somebody in California.
That's actually a really, what I think is a really neat story. So all of our call center agents, so if you call on the phone, The people that you're speaking to are working out of their home, and they're almost all in one of the states where we provide service. There are rare exceptions. And because of that, what we've seen is better service level for you and better continuity. So it's a model that's worked really well for us. And so we have some in New Mexico, and if you're in New Mexico and you call and you get that person, they might even know what street you're on. They'll visually know, where you are. We prefer that model than, an out-of-country call center and those sorts of things.
So I missed what you said about the residential authority. What is that again?
It is the Residential Utility Consumers Office. Short form is RUCO, R-U-C-O.
And they take complaints or what is it?
They're your advocate. So they're involved in every single regulatory action that comes before the commission, whether it's us, APS, anybody. So they really participate in the process. They are participating on your behalf. They look at those numbers. I can tell you they usually always come in the lowest on those numbers, and then it's really the commission kind of weeds through that and finds that the medium that they think is appropriate. We don't make the decision on the numbers. But you can absolutely contact them. But again, you can also share any thoughts you have. We don't take it personally. I promise you I don't take it personally. With the commission directly. You can send it by email, you can call them. If you want to go old school and send it by mail, they'll do that too.
Is there like a phone number for that?
And we have a procedural order to that,
Okay.
yeah. RUCO won't be on there, but if you just Google RUCO, you'll
Okay.
find it.
Okay. And lastly, you talk about water pressure and water meters. Is that just for people that have water?
Yeah, so it's two different systems. I mean, if you really want to get technical, it's different systems within the systems. But the water and wastewater systems are completely separate.
So there are no meters for wastewater?
Yeah, it's just a flat charge.
Okay.
We're not basing it on how much water you pull. And I can tell you, your water usage is actually, on average, pretty good. We have a district where the average monthly water use for half of those customers is 55,000 gallons a month. Clearly, they have a bigger house than I do.
So I will say that we do meter sewage flows on larger scales, the flows that are coming into the wastewater plants, the flows that are leaving the wastewater plants, so that we can get credit for that water that goes back into the aquifer.
So I only live here 6 months out of the year. Is there going to be an exception that you know of?
I know exactly the question. We get this quite a bit. I'll let Sarah answer this one.
So we're here those 12 months of the year, right? Jacob's making sure that the water, the sewer, everything's being taken care of. My agents are there for you. And these costs don't fluctuate that much, whether people are here or not. And so we want to make sure that the entire community is paying for all of this infrastructure 12 months out of the year. And one of the ACC rule, the Arizona Corporation Commission rule, is that you will pay for water or for sewer if connected, whether used or not. And that's primarily because 75% or more of our costs are fixed costs.
I have a question. Like, with Santan growing like it is, like this, the 50% increase in like the $70, like they're building so many more houses. So all of those people are going to have to pay too, right? So.
Yeah, so we have the question is about growth. We get this a lot. Yeah, we get this a lot. So as more customers come online, that's more revenue, right? And so we think that maybe these rates should come down. So in the next rate case, which we don't know when that will be, we'll readjust all of the costs and all of the revenue that those folks have brought in. Now the costs will have changed. I will need to hire more call center agents because those folks call. Jacob may need to hire more people, or he may be able to efficiency use some of his meter readers to go do other work, right? So that's why we have a historical test year. It's what it takes to serve you as of 2023 and the infrastructure that was in place in 2023. The next rate case will take into account everything we had to build to serve those customers, all of the people we had to hire, all of the bill printing that we had to do, all the meters we installed to serve those folks, but it will also take into account what they're paying, and so it'll be readjusted.
I have a question, not so much on the rate and everything, but on actual water,
Yes.
right? There's only so much of it, right? Santan Valley is growing, we're continuing to grow. And you said we're groundwater is where we get ours. I mean, so it's not like we're shipping in water from, New Mexico or California or wherever else.
I've heard people suggest it.
Yeah.
It's a pretty pricey pipeline.
I mean, we're all having issues, so, I mean, there's only so much to go around. I mean, and here we are continuing to grow. We want to hopefully, attract more businesses and things like that. I mean, I'm just wondering, where are we at now, as far as how much water we have available and how much continued growth can we have? I don't know if I'm making sense and doing this the right way, but.
Absolutely. So the question really is there enough water today and in the future? That's really what the question is.
Yeah, like the way we're growing is, it's amazing, right? And we're hoping to bring businesses, and I don't know if they use a different, way to measure, like if you build a house, you have to have 100 years.
Yeah.
What's the guarantee that the business has to do?
They don't have to do the 100 years from what I understand, but
No, yeah.
But in terms of water resources, so one of the things I like about working with EPCOR is everyone is smarter than me in a lot of different ways. We actually have, aside from Jacob and Sarah, we have an entire team dedicated just to water resources. And that's far more than providing conservation tips. That's making sure that our water portfolio, we kind of look at it as a portfolio, is constantly going to be what we need and even a little bit more. And we have plenty of water to serve the customers we have today, but we've also forecasted decades into the future. So that doesn't mean we stop though. So we look at, for example, we were talking about the water that we can recharge into the aquifer. Well, that's water credits that you weren't getting before. So it adds to that portfolio. And when we look at our portfolio, while you may be dependent on groundwater in this particular district, our water portfolio could be wet water, could be Colorado River water, could be groundwater, could be effluent, it could be the credits in the ground. That's the portfolio we work with. Because you can take that paper water and you might need to exchange it with someone else because they have their water there and you need it there. It's actually a pretty complex process. Arizona is a leader in terms of smart water management. So in 1980, they implemented the Groundwater Management Act. Remember a couple of years ago when the Colorado River, they were calling shortages on it, and all the headlines were saying Arizonans are being irresponsible, they're not curtailing anything. That's because this state had the foresight to plan for exactly what that was. California didn't. They had to curtail water because they didn't have a Groundwater Management Act in place. So we prepared for this decades in advance, and the leaders in the state are already thinking decades ahead of where we are today. So, aside from the stories you see about Rio Verde foothills, and that's a different scenario. That's a case where largely wildcat development happened, and there was no assured water in that place. But in terms of water, we're fine. And I would encourage you to speak with Tom at the back. He's far better at this than I am. I just ask for numbers. And kind of like, I know enough to say that, the high level stuff, but if you really want to get in deep, pardon the pun, he's your guy.
Is that it? Okay.
Well, first of all, I want to thank EPCOR for coming and making the presentation. This is what we do as Santan Valley Advisory Council, is to bring people in that we feel help the community be informed. Secondly, I want to thank Neil Carter, our state representative, for coming. It's him because he's the only one wearing a tie.
Well, we're in session, so I got dressed up now.
And he's collecting signatures for his nomination papers. We as Santan Valley Advisory Council take no positions on anything. That includes the EPCOR rate increase. And I understand also that Santan Valley Incorporated was here tonight collecting signatures. We take no position on that. We're neutral on everything. And lastly, I want to thank all of you for coming. You know, you're the reason that we do this, so thank you very much.